In the early 2000s, split fins came out, and that caused quite a stir within the diving community, dividing opinions between various divers. After all, why would you take the bit that propels you forward and actually cut it into two? It just seemed very weird. In 2003, one of the dive shops lent me a pair of fins, specifically ones similar to these ones, the Scuba Pro Twin Speeds, and I took them for a dive. Looking back in my logbook now, I see that my comments were that the fins were not good for quick power, but okay for cruising. It's many years later now, and I thought to myself, let me go and try them again to see if my opinion had changed. A number of dive buddies kindly lent me their fins to try out. That included the Scuba Pro Twin Speeds, some Tusa Expert Zooms, some Aquatics split fins. Yes, that's what they're really called, nothing fancy there. And some Apollo Biofin Pros. I used to think that with the split fins, this pattern, this chevron pattern, was unique to the Scuba Pros. But I realize now that all the others have it as well. Here it is in silver, and even the Apollo Biofin, which is otherwise smooth at the front, does have that same pattern at the back here. What surprised me about that is that surely a pattern this distinctive would have been patented by whoever came up with it first. So there had to be something deeper than that. And indeed, there is a deeper story behind it, in that a company called NatureSwing came up with a design and licensed that design to all these different manufacturers. If you go to the website now, they even list a rather large list of manufacturers that produced or produce still some split fins. In fact, each of the split fins somewhere have a little label. That's easiest to see over here. There on this one here, that basically says that this is a patented product and made under license. All of these fins have it, as you can see here. What this said to me is that this pattern isn't just there to look cool, and I have to admit that I always loved the look of these fins, but that there must be some purpose behind it. So let's look at what split fins are really all about. If you look at a more traditional fin like this Poseidon here, which has a solid blade, as the fin bends, it channels water down it and therefore creates the propulsion that we all need. In the middle, there are usually softer parts. Most of these paddle fins have that, and they create like a scoop that allows the water to channel down and therefore be more efficient. Unfortunately, not all the water goes down, but it also spills over the sides, and that creates turbulence and reduces the efficiency of the fin. With split fins, the idea is that as the fin bends, the split opens, water gets channeled by the chevron pattern down the fin, and instead of escaping over the sides, it actually goes through the middle. That means that there is less turbulence on the sides, and also it accelerates the water, which makes the fin more efficient. In fact, the creators of this, NatureSwing, call this propeller fin technology. And the idea really is that just with a boat's propeller is that as it slices through the water, it pushes water backwards. And the same idea is here as well, that as you go down, the fin pushes the water through the middle and the water goes back again. I've read somewhere that in order to use these fins most efficiently, you should actually paddle faster, but not deep strokes like you would with a lot of other fins, because then the propeller technology or the propeller effect is enhanced even more. In a traditional fin like this Poseidon one here, the whole blade helps in creating the stiffness that is needed to propel the water forwards, so it doesn't bend as a whole unit. There's also some side rails which are thicker that help in that respect as well. In split fins, the blade is obviously cut into two, and as you can see here, the middle section is quite flexible. So in order to have a stiffer blade, they always add these very thick rubbery side rails here that prevent the whole blade from flexing too much. And in fact, with the Apollos that are stiffer than any of the others, this is actually quite remarkably stiff. The side effect of that is that these fins tend to be quite heavy on land. Underwater, that's not a problem most of the time. In fact, these Scuba Pros are found to be particularly buoyant. The big question, of course, is does all this technology work? And to me, the answer is yes. The bigger question really actually is, are these fins more efficient than any other fins? And there, my feeling is, no, not really. The fins are different, however, some more than others, and I decided to test them two at a time, because the idea of taking 4 fins on a single dive seemed a bit, well, daft. The first two fins that I tested were the Apollo Biofin and the Tusa Expert Zooms. And I made actually a really good choice there because those two fins couldn't have been more different. The Tusas were very flexible and very soft on my ankles, and I must admit that I found them actually quite pleasant to use. Yes, they didn't have much torque, but for some dive sites where you don't have a lot of surge or current, that really doesn't make a difference. I just found them actually particularly pleasant to swim with. The Apollo Biofins, on the other hand, have the word pro in them, and that means that they're aimed more at the serious diver, somebody who has got the leg muscles to push themselves through the water, because I found them to be particularly stiff, unpleasantly so. They really hurt my ankle, and it was quite weird. What I found was that as I did my downstroke, it was as if there was something holding it back before it allowed me to push through. And yes, these fins have more torque than the Tusas have, but I found that the way that they delivered that torque was not the most pleasant. And I've used other fins that have got similar, if not more torque than this, that do not put so much strain on my ankles. The guy that owns this uses them with his dry suits, and dry suits being bulkier, he says they work really well for him, and I believe him. It's just not the kind of fin that I would like to use on a day-to-day basis, even though I'm a person who does like fins with a lot of torque. There are just better examples out there. If you look at the video, you can see that the Tusas flex far more than the Apollo Biofins. They really don't flex much at all. But even with that said, you can see that the number of strokes that I take, plus the amount of time that I take to get from one side of the frame to the other, is pretty much the same thing. I guess the difference really comes into it when there's a bit of surge or a bit of current, because you can put more power behind the Apollos and still move forward, whereas the Tusas would be easily overwhelmed. The second pair, the Atomics and the Skua Pros, are not only visually similar, but they were also, in terms of their performance, quite similar as well. Unfortunately, I had some bad luck in terms of getting video footage of these two fins. On the first dive, or the first attempt, the battery of my GoPro died in the 10 degrees water. It just stopped filming after 56 seconds. And then when I went back later in the week, unfortunately visibility had dropped and surge has come up. And the footage that I got isn't the best, but at least you can see what Cape Town water looks like when it's not so great as in the other videos. So as mentioned, I found that these two fins were very similar in their performance, and they fell halfway between the very stiff Biofin and the much softer Tusa Expert Zoom, and that they had a nice balance of horsepower and torque. The Atomic is physically a smaller fin than the Skua Pro one, because it's a medium rather than the Skua Pro, which is a large. And because of that, it has a smaller blade, and I found that it was a bit less efficient. But I think that if they were the same size, they would be pretty much undistinguishable from each other. Maybe it's a tiny bit softer, but it's hard to say because of the smaller fin size. I took the Skua Pros on just another dive, and conditions on that day were a bit challenging in that the visibility was not the greatest and it was a bit surgy. And what I found is that I was concentrating on the dive, not on the fins themselves. In other words, they didn't annoy me. And that to me is actually quite good praise, because it means that the fins were just doing what they were supposed to do, which is propel me forwards. Yes, I found that they lacked some of the top end torque that I sometimes like, but in general, they actually worked really, really well. The one thing which surprised me is that all of these fins actually work fairly well when you do a frog kick. You'd think that with that split that it wouldn't really work, and I don't think they're actually designed for that. But as the video shows, which is just the Apollo and the Tusa, it does actually work quite well, and the efficiency isn't even that bad. Now, the one aspect I didn't like about the split fins is the inability to scull. Most of the time when I go diving, I have a big camera with me and we have surge. So in order to not get buffeted around by the surge too much, I move my fins backwards and forwards like that, both legs at the same time, basically split, open and close again. Like I said, I call that sculling. And the idea there really is that if there's a surge that comes, I can quickly counter it to keep myself in position. Now with split fins, because of the split, this becomes really difficult. As you can see in the video, as I move my legs sideways, the blades go all over the place and they create a weird resistance that basically does not give me that ability to just counter against any surges and keep my position. In fact, you can see that I need to suddenly use my hands in order to regain my balance. For me, that is a little bit of a deal breaker because of the fact that I do a lot of underwater photography. So what is my final verdict? Have I changed my mind since 2003? To be honest, not really. What I said then still applies now. They lack a bit of high-end torque and they're good for cruising, but not for powering through surge and through currents. That said, I find that they are perfectly good fins, and it really comes down to a personal preference as to whether you like the look of these fins, whether you like the way they deliver their power. Are they more efficient than other fins? No, I don't personally think so. I think that fin technology has come a long way, and given all the fins that I've been testing recently, I find that most of them actually deliver the same amount of power over a distance if you are doing your average dive. Yes, there are obviously differences in case of strong surge or currents, but I think that most of us actually do not encounter this on a normal dive. And therefore choosing a split fin over any other fin is pretty much really up to you. If you like them, use them. If you don't use them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching.